playoffs.
Last week we got third. This split, we have to do better.
This is gonna be Schalke's year.
Nukeduck is dominating.
Last year was the first time I missed Worlds. I don't want to miss it again this year. Nobody really scares me anymore. I'm not afraid of anyone.
The whole split we've been playing catch up, but at this point people have to come to us and beat us.
The weight of expectations can be crushing. Today's fight is about who can silence the world to prove they belong with the best in Europe.
Schalke versus Splyce, our first playoffs matchup of summer, with the winner advancing to the semi-finals. I'm Aaron Medic Chamberlain, here with the two kids in class that argue about everything. It's Andrew Vedius Day and Martin Deficio Lunga.
Not everything.
Not everything.
Okay, we can use your other title, which you named yourself before this, the Deadlifters.
Yeah, we're going hard in the gym, man.
Woo! It's going to be a fun day today. I do have to give a very quick special shout out to my Nan, who turns 95 today. Happy birthday, Nan.
Happy
Hope you have a great day. But I'm afraid I have to cast some League of Legends with these two fine gentlemen. So, coming into it, it's Splyce versus Schalke. We have a pretty intense best of 5 ahead of us. Martin, something that you've been saying a lot to me is that this should be a pre-competitive best of 5, and you even expected it to go all the way to 5 games.
I went all 5 games in my predictions for this one. I think a lot of people look at Splyce and their regular season and say, nah, you know, they were the number 6 seed entering playoffs. We don't fully trust what they're doing, but they have so many veterans. They have a giant coaching staff, and they've already shown last playoffs that they can perform when it really matters in best of 5s when they got that 3rd place spot, beating Vitality in Copenhagen. So I'm really expecting them to show up and actually be very, very prepared for Schalke and make this a very close series.
Schalke did decide to be on the red side for this first pick and ban, so very interested to see how the draft has been affected. They've got rid of the Varus, Splyce have removed the Akali and Sejuani.
Now, I find this quite interesting because we are playing on patch 8.16, and a lot of nerfs came into this patch. Some of the big priority bans that we often saw on red side, like the Aatrox, Taliyah, Nocturne, Akali, they've now all been moved away, and red side has a little bit more freedom now, Deficio.
Yeah, it's important to highlight that Aatrox is no longer a must ban. I feel like that's been the case for a couple of patches now. Things like Taliyah and Nocturne as well, you don't have to necessarily ban away instantly. Akali is probably the only one remaining if you are playing against a mid lane who's already shown he can carry on this champion. Another thing about red side is you can counterpick a lot more, especially for jungle, which can be a key thing in this matchup.
Now, one of the cool things that we've noticed about Splyce is that they often prioritize their mid lane pick very early. They like to get Nisqy something that he's comfortable on. But with the recent changes in the patch, is Zoe something that they still want to put a lot of priority on? Do they feel they need to get a very successful comfort mid laner for him?
No, instead they're going to go for the Braum first for kaSing.
I think that's a key thing with the Alistar ban as well, to remove the 2 most played champs for VandeR. He's kind of forced on something new. Obviously, he's already played things like Pyke and Rakan during the split, but it's really just been Alistar and Braum in almost every single game for him and Schalke. Also, with the Sejuani being banned away, it is the most played champ for Amazing. So we're gonna see some changes, at least, on the Schalke lineup compared to the very standard comfort picks.
Now, it's interesting that Schalke are looking to still prioritize the Trundle, as they're expecting a tank jungler to potentially come out from Xerxe. He did receive a couple of nerfs on this patch, largely around his Q, the amount of damage that it does, the amount of stats that it steals, or the duration rather, and overall, the expectation was that he would lower it in terms of value, but Schalke is still putting a lot of priority in it early on into the draft.
I think also just one thing we have to highlight just from the ban phase, the Sion ban coming in from Schalke in the very first game is actually quite surprising. Sion has not really been, you know, a big meta pick in a while. He was buffed slightly here on 8.16, and clearly enough for Schalke to actually respect the potential pick and remove it. We're obviously most likely looking at a tank v tank matchup top, and Sion could have been one of those choices.
Now, the Ezreal has also been taken away from Upset, one of his most successful AD carries so far this split, 5-2 on the champion. And it's something that Upset has had a lot of success with, and with the Varus banned away, we should see something unique coming out from Upset. He has tend to favor towards the Ashe. When you look at the Shen, you can flex it towards top side or bot, but if it is going towards the bot side, they may look for something a little more aggressive.
Yeah, we obviously know Xerxe is a famous Shen player back in the days when he played carries and Shen. It was always fun to watch him play this champion, but of course with VandeR losing the Alistar and the Braum, there is a good chance he will take it. We have to wait and see though. I think Splyce so far getting very, very standard, very good overall picks for them. That's not even telling too much about the draft, because we know they love to draft a bot lane that can self-sustain.
As we get into the second ban phase, we'll have to see how this does play out. Cassiopeia ban coming out from Schalke. I know that was in your picks to watch, Vedius, and we did think that Nisqy might revert back to that with Zoe being nerfed.
You only have to think back to the third place match against Vitality, where Nisqy had a phenomenal performance on the champion. It is considered one of the better matchups into Ryze. So Schalke showing that respect. You do really limit the mid lane pool. Orianna would be the one that comes to mind for Nisqy to go towards. But right now with the draft that they have, when you look at Ezreal, he does have a pretty solid 2-item spike. He has decent poke. He doesn't offer a huge amount of pressure in terms of the early lane. So I would like Splyce to get some kind of winning matchup elsewhere on the rest of the map.
On the other side of things, Schalke actually locking in the Kai'Sa here for Upset. Not an AD carry we've seen him on too much. They also have the Poppy still available for Xerxe in that top lane if he wants to flex that Shen to support.
Yeah, suddenly Schalke might be able to get the absolute best pick available for Vizicsacsi. I just want to see what Splyce will draft here, because they have to blind pick, obviously, for the top lane. Mid, they know it's a Ryze, but to be fair, we've actually seen Ryze top lane as well, so Schalke could still swap that to top side. Xerxe tried to play it against H2K, ended up losing that game.
Didn't work out too well for them. If they'd won that game, they probably would have got second place. They wouldn't even be here.
All right, let's frame the Ryze then. But it actually makes it pretty difficult because of the Shen and the Ryze being able to still be moved around quite a bit. Obviously, Peter Dunn is fully aware of this. Gnar coming in.
And the one thing we can say pretty confidently for Schalke is that they definitely have a strong side lane presence with Ryze and Shen. Interestingly, we are seeing the Syndra come out from Nisqy. Now, this is something that he did play earlier on in the split. He didn't find success with the champion. And against Ryze, in terms of the early laning phase, you can definitely generate an element of pressure. Interestingly, we're rounding things out with a Maokai from the side of Schalke. Wow. Okay, that's definitely a pick, especially voluntarily picking it into the Gnar. I do feel like Splyce, those winning lane matchups, they now have it in the early lane, in the early game in mid, and they've definitely got it up in the top side of the map with the Gnar into the Maokai as well.
Yeah, it's a very well-rounded Splyce draft in the sense that they have that bot lane they don't need to assist, and then they can focus with a jungler that can build Predator and Gragas, who can gank in the early game around two good solo lanes. Could set up a lot of success for Xerxe, specifically if he's active in the early game. And we just heard Trevor, or Quick Shots, after the interview with Peter Dunn, say Splyce wanted to work on their mid game because they knew their early game was fine. They just needed the transition towards the mid and then late game to be clean, so they can actually finish games, because they did beat Schalke in the early game when they played just a week ago, and I think they're trying to do the same here with this draft.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing what they can do. When Xerxe found a lot of success last split, it was playing through top side of the map, and when you have such a strong matchup in favor of Splyce with the Gnar going into the Maokai, playing through that top side is definitely a big option, but also Syndra has such great gank setups. The stun is pretty easy to land, it's very quick. Nukeduck likely going to be forced to take the cleanse out of respect towards that mid lane matchup, and it's a big lane that you can look to play through if you want to.
Instead, it looks like he is actually going for the teleport as we get on into the game. We'll have to discuss that more as we jump on in. Talk a lot about how Splyce have a winning top, a winning mid. They want to progress through to the mid game. As we get on into our first quarterfinal here of the summer split, I want to know what Schalke are looking to do with this composition.
They want to scale, first of all. Maokai, Kai'Sa are not champs you lock in if you want to dominate the early game on their side. If we get past that 25-minute mark, this composition from Schalke can be fantastic, but we also have to remember, Trundle is nerfed in the early game. So while he does still add a lot of value later on, it does hurt him compared to what Xerxe can do on this Predator Gragas here. I'm really looking at Splyce trying to get that early advantage and showing us that they can play a strong early game again against Schalke.
I think it's going to be really important to find it as well against Schalke. They are a team that you know, throughout the split have demonstrated that when they do fall behind in the early game, they're actually pretty good at coming back later on. And a lot of that does come down to their ability to team fight. As a team, they've really impressed me, and I believe that they are one of, if not the best, late game team fighting teams that we have in our league, largely because of the really smart positioning that we see from Upset, the good engages that you often get from both Xerxe and VandeR, and overall they've really impressed me as how they work as a 5-man. When you're drafting a Maokai, it is one of those compositions where you're saying, hey, we are waiting for those late game fights, but to get to that point will be difficult when there are such strong laners in top and mid from the side of Splyce.
And both teams across the course of the split have played much more measured, much slower early games. If we look at some of their statistics, you can see their kills plus deaths in their games, 10th and 9th, their combined kills per minute, 9th and 10th, and then their win time is the slowest across the course of the split as well. So you can tell that Schalke want to scale. Splyce may be trying to change things up a little bit here.
Definitely feels like it. Obviously, with the Gnar, you have the option of building things like Blade of the Rune King, your Rage Blade, these kind of items where you become almost a pure split pusher, which keeps the control on the side of Odoamne in this matchup against Vizicsacsi. That is one way for Splyce suddenly to try and have a winning side lane, but obviously the Ryze will then be favored later on against Nisqy. So there's some issues with it, but I can definitely see Odoamne aim for a split push focus build in this game here. I just want to see if Xerxe is going to be active. Because when I saw Gragas return to the meta, when Spirit pulled it out with Predator, it was screaming early game ganks. But there's a lot of Gragas players who just chill. They farm, they know they have great scaling, but with this build here, if you go back early, get your boots, you can look for an instant gank, level 3, level 4, and it can be so effective, and I want to see that from Xerxe.
Lots of damage coming down from Nisqy in the mid lane, but when Splyce were so effective at the latter half of Spring Split was when Xerxe was aggressive and making plays in the early game. Here you can see between weeks 1 and 6 in Spring, a much slower tempo, and Splyce went 6 and 6. Between weeks 7 and 12, much quicker, higher jungle proximity, more kills, and Splyce went 12 and 7.
And the lane that he often played around was the top lane, Odoamne. This was the guy that he often enabled, and that's why they were branded as the roaring Romanian duo. Deficio, you talked about it. But in terms of early ganking right now, it looks like Xerxe has his eyes set on bot with Amazing looking towards the top side. There is no vision towards the bot side of the map, but Schalke showing that respect already. Xerxe looking for a couple of opportunities. It does feel like that both junglers have traded sides of the map, given that we did see Xerxe go for an early invade onto the opposite blue, and Amazing now hanging around this top side, seeing maybe he can go for a counter gank or maybe just trying to relieve the pressure from Xerxe.
Good to see our laners respecting it. Sometimes, even when the map gets cut in half, the guy on the other side is still chasing forward, hitting the turret like a level 3, and he gets ganked, and you're just like, how does it even happen? It's so obvious. Not this time, Odoamne steps away, and the same thing happened on the bottom side. So we're waiting for the first recall from Xerxe before he gets the boots and can actually fully use his Keystone on the side of the Gragas, where I think on the side of Amazing, you don't actually have to do too many things early game.
I want to look a little bit more at this mid lane matchup now that we have like the first jungle ganks have happened, because Vedius in Picks and Bans, you talked about how you thought Nukeduck would probably run the cleanse. He has opted for the teleport on the Ryze in this lane.
So one of the reasons why you can go for teleport, on Ryze it makes a lot of sense because you often look to play through the side lane later on into the game, and if you are looking to play that 1-3-1 style or potentially 1-4, you want to have a way of joining the rest of the team should a fight kick off. As well as that, often Syndra generates a lot of pressure in lane because recently the damage on her Q did get buffed, and because it has a relatively low mana cost, you can just keep throwing it out, you can push the wave, and you can just get in the face of a Ryze and make his day just very obnoxious. And it's very difficult for him to trade back because you can just stand behind the minions and you're a happy chappy. But because he takes so much harass, he then has the TP full lane, which he can then use to stay healthy, get an early tier, and then just start farming up and scaling up. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him go for a bit of early magic resist, like a Banshee's Veil or even an Abyssal Mass.
I mean, I think what we might actually see is the moment Nisqy hits level 6, Body Slam flash in the mid lane. Or you can also do it now.
Xerxe gets the gank in, Body Slam used, Nukeduck tries to flash away, the barrel's going to slow him up, there's first blood to Splyce!
So we got it slightly earlier than expected, but when you do not run the cleanse in mid lane and you have things like a Gragas or a stun setup from Syndra, the gank setup is just perfect to get onto Nukeduck. Luckily for him, he didn't use TP before, he can use it now. Back to lane, bot lane fighting.
kaSing's just going to put up the Unbreakable here. Concussive blows will land onto VandeR as well. Very, very safe lane is the Ezreal Braum.
And we talked about it in draft. the mid lane was one option that Splyce could look to play through. You have a winning matchup in topside with Gnar versus Maokai, but you also have strong early gank setup with the Syndra. The stun is relatively easy to land because of how short range Ryze is, and because he kind of walks towards the minions as a very linear champion, it makes for easy setup.
Do want to bring you guys' attention to the fact that during tonight's series, you can watch games on Odoamne's point of view in our POV stream over at twitch.tv/Riot Games 2. Go there now because there's a gank going in the top lane. Amazing's coming in. Odoamne trying to get to safety. Here comes Xerxe as well. Chachi's very low. Odo, level 6 already as well. They can trade back onto this. Amazing flashes away. The chase continues, but Splyce seemed to come out on top in that trade.
And right there, it felt like Chachi were screaming, let's continue, we can fight, we can win this. And Amazing was saying, let's step away from this one. We don't actually want to fully chase, because Chachi kept going, forcing Amazing to kind of stay around, and then he ends up flashing away because Xerxe got in melee range, despite no flash on the side of the Gragas. Back to that mid lane gank super quick. I think Xerxe obviously didn't want to waste his flash like he did, but when it is a first blood, trying to shut down enemy mid laner, you end up often just going all in for it, and you want it to 100% guarantee it, that's why you end up flashing. Will of course cost him a little bit in terms of the next gank he can pull off, but I'm looking at this mid lane once again. There is no flash on Nukeduck. If you land that long range stun from Nisqy, you're probably killing him again with Xerxe around.
So Predator
Maybe even without.
Even without, Nukeduck so low. Nisqy flashes in. What was that?
That is a Syndra at level 6, ladies and gentlemen.
The duck has been cooked.
He has been by Nisqy. This is one of the players that we had our eyes on coming into this series. He's been most consistent so far this split. He picked the Syndra into Nukeduck. He had a bit of help from his jungler, and now he finds himself a solo kill.
And this is why I've been saying it's the year of Nisqy, all split long.
Deficio.
Because of stuff like this. He gets ahead in his lane, he has level 6 and no flash on Nukeduck, no way for him to actually survive. The moment he gets hit by the combo, he's trying to build MR, it's obviously not going to be there in time. Huge advantage for Splyce, and Nisqy in playoffs, it's a very, very fun player to watch because he's not afraid of going for these kind of outplays, and suddenly he's actually getting really far ahead.
Good job there from Nisqy. Now, Splyce, their win condition is play through mid. Not only is one of the side lane options for Schalke in a deficit, but you started snowballing this very strong early to mid game champion in the form of a Syndra. Her early game burst is monumental, and many champions do not build a lot of magic resist before the first 20 minutes. So they need to look to keep playing around this lane, try and snowball this even more after they steal away the Schalke blue buff.
I also want to look at what's happening topside in terms of the CS. Like Odoamne at the moment, after some fighting up there, he's falling pretty far down. There's a wave being built towards him, but it's obviously not gonna even out the score. So Vizicsacsi on this Maokai, we know he's gonna be an absolute monster. He's actually looking for a tower dive as well.
The cats come out amazing, coming in from the
Shen
side as well. Twisted advance. Shen ult use. Odoamne is going to jump away. Can go Mega here, looking for the extra health. Can he get Mega in time? He can't! Schalke get their first kill of the quarterfinals.
Ooh, good dive there from Schalke. They set that up pretty cleanly, utilizing the Shen ult, but given that now there's a numbers advantage towards bot side, Splyce find themselves an early Drake. Now, this ties back into what you were talking about, Deficio, that deficit in the top side of the map. I feel a lot of it comes from the fact that Xerxe spent most of this game playing towards the bottom half of the map, invading onto Schalke's jungle, playing around the mid lane as well, and he just has to respect the fact that he doesn't have jungle support, and Amazing is always hanging around, so he's been very much on the back foot, very defensive, and now Schalke, they found that window to find a gank, but now they have their eyes set. Splyce, rather, have their eyes set on trying to punish where they have an advantage.
Nukeduck giving a little bit of respect across towards Nisqy and Xerxe. There's Xerxe.
A little bit? Yeah,
quite a lot.
Back to base, mate.
I remember watching him play against Fnatic, and he didn't respect caps and procs at that time, so maybe he's learned his lesson.
But man, he's so far down. Like, this is actually like watching Schalke against Fnatic, where enemy jungler targets him in the early game, and suddenly he falls behind in the 1v1, and the enemy mid laner can actually take him down. This is a play on top side. Schalke saying, we want to all in for this turret. We're not going to get the Infernal Drake towards the bottom lane because Nisqy is around the bottom side. We don't want to deal with Nisqy, so let's go top, far away from the enemy mid laner, and trade a turret for an Infernal Drake.
Surprised that Odoamne chose to hold on to his ultimate. I think he wanted to make sure that he could land it onto one or two members to increase the chances of his survival, but as a result he got taunted early, which means that he never got the ult off, he never got the bonus HP, and he ended up losing his life. So the gold's still very even though Splyce have found advantages in the middle lane. Top side of the map is still going well for Schalke, and the bot side is still scaling. You think about the late game threat of Kai'Sa versus Ezreal, one of the reasons we often see Kai'Sa picked into an Ez is because you get a pretty free lane laning phase, you can ramp up nicely, and then you can become this 3-item late game carry that Schalke's looking to utilize once you hit that 30 to 35 minute mark.
It's quite interesting to see how that lead has developed in different... Okay, well, Nukeduck takes a lot of damage there. He does survive using the shield from his Rune Prison, but big CS advantage for Nisqy in that mid lane. 25 ahead. Top. I thought Odoamne should win this lane into the Maokai. We talked about how Gnar's into tanks usually pretty good, but it seems like Xerxe is the one who's actually able to get ahead in the CS.
Gnar in the first part of the game anyway is not that scary or hard to deal with. Like, his damage is not high enough to actually fully bully out a lane. And as Vedius highlighted earlier, Amazing has spent a lot of time on top side. Xerxe is finally gonna be like, see, I'm here, Odoamne, stop crying for jungle tanks.
It's not 0% jungle proximity. That's what he goes after.
Yeah.
You can't complain about this, Odo. I've given you at least 1% now.
I will say though, Odoamne is probably just going Wit's End into potentially another split push item, and while he's down now, and it definitely does hurt the team, he's just going to continue build to try and be good in 1v1s. And while he won't be able to kill Odoamne for at least quite a while, kill Xerxe for a long time, he will try and get some pressure later in the game.
I wonder if it makes the most sense to go towards split pushing though, because when
at this point, yeah, maybe just go full
because
tank.
when you think about how strong Nisqy is trying to force like fights around the 20-minute mark, maybe you just get the tanky option, you have him get involved with the fights as well, and then you just try and snowball in that mid game that we heard from Peter Dunn say they wanted to try and improve. Especially when you look at this Schalke comp, it's all about late game. Maokai is one of the best late game tanks in the game. Kai'Sa one of the best late game hyper carries. So I feel that if you are Splyce and if you're Odoamne, maybe trying to build split push now isn't the best course of action to go towards. Instead, just play towards that mid game where you know you're going to be strong.
Play towards those fights around objectives. Already an Infernal sitting on the back of Splyce. They have played a very strong early game here, much more around Nisqy than we have seen in the last few weeks from them. And we talked earlier about how we expected Splyce to come in with a game plan. They had a week to prepare, they had all of this supporting stuff. Well, I think we're seeing the fruits of their labors over the last 7 days.
Yeah, and we said in the draft when we saw the first 3 picks, like, this is very much showing us a situation where they want to play around the top side of the map, at least not towards bot lane, because they early draft the Braum and the Ezreal, so they're happy just kind of saying we have a lane that we don't need to touch. It allowed them to go towards Nisqy. Eventually, they probably would have loved to go towards Odoamne as well, but he then lost his turret. And at this point, I think Vizicsacsi on the side of Schalke is kind of the hope in a lot of ways to make sure they don't lose the mid game too hard, so we get upset towards late game, because he needs a couple of items on the Kai'Sa here. But the Maokai already at this point with these items, like, he's actually really hard to kill. Yes. And if there is a fight, Xerxe might just be the big carry despite being on a tank.
You know, you talked about it, Deficio. There's a Wit's End coming in from Odoamne. Looks like that he is geared towards playing towards side. Maybe he wants to build towards the threat of Nukeduck. Maybe if he moves off onto his side.
It's both magic dealers, obviously, no matter who it is. I think you need some sort of pressure in a side lane.
I think that's fair.
Even without you necessarily winning it, you need to at least be able to stand in this lane as Odoamne, because otherwise, against Schalke, you never really want to give up 2 side lanes. You know, Nukeduck in 1, and obviously the Maokai.
My concern is you can't really move your Syndra off to a side lane, right? So
it gets harder to do.
I'm curious as to how Splyce are gonna, what their game plan is over the next few steps, because ideally they want to take this mid tier 1. I'm not sure. Rift Rod was in fact taken by Schalke. But as right now, Splyce are grouping up towards the bot side of the map. They kind of have this eyes on this mid tier 1, but you can already see Xerxe grouping up with the team.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can keep Kobbe on the bottom side for as long as you want. Like, and Ezreal is safe enough to actually push the lane and then leave to join the rest of the team, and you play the classic, you know, 1-4 Odoamne in one side lane, the other 4 trying to group together around your insanely strong Syndra. Because what's going to happen with the moment they get to a turret? He tries to land 1 stun, and you're all in. And if you kill someone, you take the turret right after. So they have a lot of ways with the 4-man group, and just leave Odoamne on an island, unless you desperately need him to, like, set up some sort of engage.
Now, note that Odoamne did push up top. Xerxe has gone to go catch the wave, which has given Splyce this window to bring Odoamne down without the need for his teleport. Drake is just about to spawn, which means that Splyce are guaranteed a numbers advantage in the bot side of the map, and they can maybe force a TP out from Xerxe. The question is, will Schalke look to contest for this Drake, or will they just hand over a second Infernal to the side of Splyce?
Splyce looking very strong in the early game here. I want to just zoom us out a little bit, have a look at the bigger picture here, because Splyce across the last few weeks have looked a lot stronger than they did at the start of the split. We have to remember they went to Rift Rivals having only won 2 games in the EU LCS, beat Team Liquid and then seem to have found their form across the second half of the split.
And fun fact, the way they beat Team Liquid was with a very strong early game.
It was insanely good.
They actually got like leads in bot lane and mid lane, and suddenly they looked like a team who could just snowball out of control, and that's one of the ways they've found success in the past. They just don't always show it. It's like they save it for some of the key moments, and a quarterfinal against Schalke, well, that's one of the moments you want to bring it out.
Yeah, and you kind of converse that to Schalke. This team started off a little bit shaky, but after their first 2-3 weeks, they kind of revitalized. They just looked extremely clean. They were on an insane record after their loss to Fnatic, where they were just winning all their games. And Schalke coming into playoffs, everyone expected them to be second place. Everyone thought that this team was so good, it had no clear weaknesses, that they would take a clear second place. And then the H2K upset happened, the UOL upset happened, the Rocket upset happened, and obviously we had a very exciting set of tiebreakers, but everyone still looks at the Schalke squad as heavy hitters, the big favorites coming into this series. But so far, what we know is the last time they met, it was close. Splyce got an early lead, Schalke came back in these late game fights. We're now set up in an exactly the same scenario where Splyce have an early lead, Schalke have a stronger late game team fight. Can they get there though, or have Splyce been able to improve upon their ability to use their early leads?
He's around mid lane, Odoamne is following him. This Rift Herald is not going to be the greatest for Schalke, but they're still trying to siege with it.
And taking a bit of a chunk already. It's going to push forward if they can hit the eye. Does take a bit of damage off it, but still half the towers.
Yeah, got the hit onto the turret, but it's kind of showing how Schalke doesn't have a lot of pressure on the map, that they get a Rift Herald and they have to end up using it behind their own mid lane turret. Normally, you always get at least some sort of setup with a minion wave as well, and it's actually Schalke putting that Rift Herald into losing mid turret.
And now Splyce have the right set on the top, because with full control of the mid and Nukeduck having to answer the wave down bot, 3 members of Splyce can cleanly walk into the top side jungle, get all the vision down. They know exactly where Schalke is or where they're not, and right now the top side of the map is where they're not, so they can easily take their third out of town.
And I'm so happy to see Splyce in this first game come in here, actually play around Nisqy, get an early lead, now secure another outer turret, and show everyone how this is going to be a competitive series. Despite being the lowest seed in playoffs, they're not just going to fall flat on their face and lose to Schalke. It's a team, again, with a lot of big names on it, and some of them, definitely the Nisqy guy, is showing up.
We so often come into quarterfinals and it's kind of like you have top 4 teams and then the other 2 who are there and may cause an upset. This time we have a Super 6. We have 6 teams that can all challenge for that top spot, and that's why this quarterfinals and this semifinals and this road to Madrid is actually so much more exciting than perhaps playoffs of the past.
Yeah, I really like that name, Super 6.
Yeah,
you know,
I agree.
It sounds
it's
great.
really catchy, really sticks with you, you know.
Gets the message across.
It does.
And so far in our Super 6, we have Seed 3 versus Seed 6. Remember that the winners of these will be clearly decided as to who goes up against who in the semi-final, which means that for Splyce, they would end up going against Fnatic, which many expected to be the most dangerous in playoffs. But that's still a long road ahead. And Splyce so far in this early game, looking pretty good. They held on to an 800 gold lead for the time being. We're approaching the 20-minute mark where second items will start to be completed. And I feel that for Schalke, right now, you still don't want to force anything. You still want to stall out. You're still waiting for those kind of third items to come through, especially on the Kai'Sa. But the things Schalke have to be careful of is
Oh!
Pew, 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 pew. A red buff was stolen. Great, good job. But
Not much has happened for a while. I like to get in there every now and
get
again.
in there, man. Get in there. Enjoy it. Feel it. But the one thing that Schalke have to be scared of is Splyce trying to force Baron. I feel like that's a big objective that can allow Splyce to force fight around this mid-game where they are strong.
They might have to worry about the Infernal Drake coming up in a couple of minutes. Might be a third one for Splyce, and that's one of the ways where suddenly the champion scaling means less and less if there's triple Infernal on the other side, and the stats will get even out or maybe even beaten just by all the extra number Splyce will get. And right now, like, this is the perfect moment. And once Nisqy goes back and actually fully completes most likely his Void Staff, you then have the fully stacked T on Kobbe. You don't have 2 items on the Kai'Sa on the other side. Like, this is where I want to see Splyce just continue to get further ahead. They should not just be sitting and staying even with Schalke at this point. I need another outer turret to drop. I need that next Infernal to go in their favor. And then you can say it's been a successful transition to mid-game. And we can start talking about the Baron play after that.
The question is, Deficio, though, when you last cast H2K versus Schalke, a lot throughout that game you said, Schalke fans, you don't want to start panicking yet. This isn't the point of panic. But then the moment they lost that Baron, that's when you gave permission for fans to panic. So far in this game, do you think Schalke should be panicking? I feel like Schalke fans don't need to panic just yet.
Not fully. Again, they really do not like the Drake RNG in this case, of it being triple Inferno, but obviously Schalke decided to play on top side with the Rift Herald instead of going for Drakes.
What is your panic percentage then? I'm going to go Vedius first. What's your panic percentage?
Right now, I'd say it's like a 30%.
30% panic?
I still have my eyes on Upset, who's farming really well. He has the Storm Razors completed, and he's very close to completing the Rage Blade. Maokai is completed some Fire Cape and is going to have the Abyssal Mask up pretty soon. And these are the two key players that will be instrumental in these late game team fights for the side of Schalke. And right now, Splyce, they've been utilizing pressure very well. They've had all 3 lanes consistently pushed up, or at the very least 2, forcing Schalke to answer on one side, and they're getting deep vision over and over again.
I want to see if Schalke wants to contest now. It's hard for them. Voidstaff is there for Nisqy. They've lost vision of the area, so the moment you walk in blind, 1 stun from a Syndra and you're probably dead. Xerxe is trying to be the one who has to check what's happening. Looks like with amazing recalling, they're just getting ready to surrender the 3rd Infernal Drake for Splyce. And they have 3 champions currently stacking damage on the side in Gnar, Ezreal, and Syndra. Especially the Syndra late game will end up having an insane amount of damage.
So it's 24%, right? So that's roughly a quarter increase in damage.
Yep.
That's a lot.
It is a sizable sum indeed.
I mean, just thinking about it, like a Syndra ultimate, if you're able to land like four balls down, ends up doing like 500, 600 damage. You add a quarter onto that, that's like up to 750 damage. That's a ridiculous amount of damage just off the back of Infernal Drakes.
It definitely is. Splyce have had the early game they wanted. They only sit 1,000 gold ahead. They do have that triple Infernal in their back pocket. They're a tower ahead, but they haven't broken those tier 2s yet. So would like to see them do that. That's what you were talking about, Deficio, really pushing the tempo of the game, pushing the pace.
Yeah, I don't think they've fully utilized how much stronger their mid laner was, and even the AD carry for the last couple of minutes. It's again, as Peter Dunn highlighted, one of the big things they've really been working on is this specific moment we're seeing right now. That transition where early game ends, you start moving in towards mid game, Baron spawns for the first time, and they haven't gotten far enough ahead that you're just instantly screaming this game is over. 2 items is now there for Upset as a big thing, and suddenly the Baron fight is probably going to be the deciding factor.
Yeah, and the CS differential in mid lane, it was 30, it's now even. You've got 2 items sitting on Upset, who is actually ahead of Kobbe in farm. Odo and Xerxe pretty even in that top lane, so it's gone from a state where Splyce were in a superb spot to now Schalke looking like they might be able to fight back.
They're definitely going to make it close, and that's the thing. They did the same in week 9 where they lost that early game, but then came back through some good late game picks into then strong team fighting, as Vedius highlighted earlier. But yeah, effectively we saw Odoamne pick up most of the farm on Splyce compared to Nukeduck on the other side. And with all the farm on Odoamne, he's gotten his 2 items now. I want to see if he can actually start pushing in Xerxe and then roam first. Leave the bot lane first. Force Xerxe to use TP. And that's why you have this Gnar against the Maokai, so you get the push into roam. And he's been doing it a bit. Black Cleaver there as well, very efficient against Vizicsacsi. Nisqy will force Nukeduck back.
I don't think you really want to try and go toe-to-toe with a Syndra who is 2 kills ahead of you at this moment.
Also, just as a small micro thing, since we have the time.
We do have the time.
Some mid laners at home might be wondering why Nisqy went for very early Void Staff. And usually the cutoff point rule is if the enemy has around 80 magic resistance, then it's worth investing in an early Void Staff. And you just have to look at some of the items to recognize, there's a decent amount of magic resistance on the side of Schalke, so just getting it early means that you don't lose a lot of that burst. You ignore a lot of, or you reduce a lot of that magic resistance, means that you are still that one-shot threat. But the problem with Syndra is, the later the game goes, like, shields come into account, you also have the Shen ulti there, Maokai just has so much health that her one-shot ability really becomes reduced, and so she does kind of fall off in the late game. Her damage is still there, especially if she can land it onto a Squishy, or even a Ryze, and often your role is just to chunk out a tank in the late game fights, but you do have to be a little bit more careful as the game progresses.
And I want to see how much damage he can deal to someone like Vizicsacsi. There is true damage on the W. Combine that then with an Ezreal who's going to build Blade the Run King. Like, there's a lot of ways that you can try and burst down the Maokai in time. Obviously, the risk is the enemy carries are probably killing your tank at the same time. And if you have a Maokai versus a Gnar, if you look at the items, well, the Maokai probably stays alive for 10 seconds longer than the Gnar at this point. So it's going to be a little bit difficult for them to play their, kill the tanks first style, unless Xerxe goes in on his own, and then you can burst him down.
But now when we're talking a little bit about the comps and we think about their ability to take Baron, I kind of give the slight edge over in terms of Baron taking speed to Schalke. I don't think Splyce have the fastest Baron in the world, and I feel like that right now, the only way in which they'd use Baron is to force a fight rather than to try and rush it down. They have really good vision control around the area, but one of the big risks that they have is finding a 5v5 fight versus Schalke right now might not be the optimal decision for Splyce.
Why not, though?
Because, I mean, you still have Kai'Sa and Maokai, and like as Deficio was alluding to, just look at the two front lines builds. You have a Black Cleaver and a Wit's End versus an Abyssal Mask and a Sunfire Cape. That front line is so much stronger from the side of Schalke, and Upset is now working towards his third completed item. So, like, they would definitely be close fights. You can see that Splyce still have the item advantage, but in a full 5v5, just because of the front line, I kind of give the edge over to Schalke right now.
I mean, you can make the case for Splyce saying we got triple Infernal, we can wait.
That's true.
Like,
right.
the longer we go into the game, the more benefits we get from the percentage increase.
I agree with that, but then as the enemy builds more magic resist, builds more tankiness, it's just going to fall off. And when we talked about the win condition for Schalke, we said purely they want to get to 3 items. They want to scale up. So the longer the game goes on, you have to start to look in Schalke's favor.
I mean, triple Infernal happened, and again, it makes it harder to talk about the scaling part because tanky items become less and less effective the more of them you get. Damage items, however, they become better and better and better, especially when you get percentage scaling on them. Imagine Syndra with triple Infernal and a death cap at some point in this game. It doesn't matter then the Chachi's added another MR item because he probably ends up taking more damage. So I can see from Splyce's point of view why they're not actually trying to overforce this. Even though, if we just look at the draft and ignore the Drakes, they would have otherwise looked for it.
And they're going to force a fight in the mid lane. VandeR's going to taunt away here. It's only amazing on the flank of Schalke.
That was a small slap and then they stepped away.
It's just a little skirmish in the mid lane. But okay, so we say that Splyce are happy scaling up. What is Schalke happy doing now? Because at the moment, they're just playing reactionary. They're going where Splyce are. If Splyce go towards Baron, Schalke go towards Baron. But if we think the scaling is probably in advantage of Splyce, they're looking for the pick on Odoamne. The flash from Chachi, not in range! Odo will flash the wall to safety.
Oof, very close there. Surprised that Splyce were able... Oh, sorry, Odoamne was in that sort of a position. Not sure how he got caught out like that. It looked like the bot side was over-pushed from the side of Odo, and Schalke had vision control towards the bot side of the map, which meant that Odo didn't really have the support necessary to be able to pressure that far, and Schalke very nearly found themselves their second kill of the game.
And to your point about Schalke, I don't think they have to throw away their 3-item spikes just because the enemy team towards 5 and 6 items ends up having a much bigger advantage, because that can still be a big moment for them. Schalke could fight right now and actually go for an engage like they tried to do against the Gnar on the bottom side. Like, I think Chachi's he's hoping he's just in range for the W, but it's such a short range for him and he just can't get there in time. And that could have been a kill into a Baron. And suddenly Schalke would have been doing something on the map. Let's see what happens. Odoamne is fighting.
Odoamne is going to be safe for the moment. VandeR flashes across the wall. Still looking for the stun here. Upset on the chase as well. No killer instinct for him, but he doesn't need it because Odoamne is right in range. Ignite down as well, and Odo has nowhere to go. Baron has been started. Odo's going to fall now. VandeR doesn't have the ult. They can't rejoin the fight, but Amazing's there. Splyce actually back away. Decide they're not tanky enough to live through that Baron damage.
So I'm surprised that Splyce weren't able to force that harder. They weren't able to get any... Well, a lot of teleports were used because Schalke invested so many trying to get kills towards the bot side, but Xerxe being surprisingly squishy in this early game, kaSing getting chunked out by the Baron means that they could not commit to it. Only 2 members of Schalke were enough to stop the Baron siege, which means that Schalke not only get themselves a kill, but they also get themselves their 3rd out of tower of the game.
I think that was such a good play from Schalke, knowing they can also TP in with Vizicsacsi to the Baron itself, and worst case it's a 3 versus 4, where you're full HP and they've been tanking the Baron for quite a while.
Yeah.
So this to me felt like Schalke were in full control of what was actually going to happen, and at this point here, by catching Odoamne twice in the side lane, they've made sure that now, you know, Nukeduck on 3 items on his side. Chachi, of course, is super tanky. It's just a question of how much does triple Infernal mean for the full late game fights, because we're getting there. We're 30 minutes in. It's 4 kills. Yep. We warned everyone regarding, you know, low amounts of kills, teams not focused on all-in aggression. Maybe against Odoamne they will make an exception.
Odoamne, the one they're going for once again, has all of his team's deaths up to now, and it might be adding another one to that list. Twisted Advance comes out. Nukeduck gonna look for the final bit of damage. Nisqy actually gets on a killing spree up towards the top side. They do get the damage down in the bottom lane. Now, what is Splyce doing on the other side of the map?
So kills being traded all across the board, and while Schalke send 2 members bot, Splyce to have their whole team grouped up mid, and I feel like they're gonna take these towers faster than Schalke will.
Oh, he actually stopped the recall right there on Vizicsacsi on purpose from Kobbe. He was not aiming for minions. He just wanted Sjokz so they can continue to push. Amazing is just top lane, playing his own little PvE game while Nukeduck is getting bot turret.
Looks like Syndra's going to back away. They're looking for that inhib in mid. Upset is there on the front line. Sjokz coming in as well. They cannot quite get the damage to take down the inhib, but now Amazing has the flank. Upset down low. The inhib goes down, but here is Sjokz. Amazing flanks it. 4v3 in favor of Splyce at the moment. Nukeduck still pushing in that bottom lane. Here comes VandeR. Sjokz so low. Look at the damage from the unleashed power. That's enough. And now Splyce will back away after taking that inhib.
It ends up being an even trade across the board, but Splyce grabbed themselves an extra kill onto Sjokz. There was a big wave in towards the bot side. I was curious as to how low that tower got, but it ends up not dropping in the end. Schalke, they walk away with inhibitor on the bot side. Sjokz being able to interrupt that back from Nisqy was very, very integral.
Here we go, starting up the Baron. Teleport coming in from Splyce as well. Sjokz still dead, 25 seconds left on him, but Upset is a key carry at that 3-item point.
No ulti yet from Nisqy. Odoamne's ult is also running out. I think Splyce, they're gonna stay around it to try and finish it, but we have 4 Schalke members.
They're jumping on the jungle. If they can take him out, that would be monumental, but they can't quite get it. Amazing flashed away. Sjokz up in 9 seconds, 4,000 HP on the Baron.
Someone needs to
Amazing's
go
gonna have to
in.
come and join this. No flash on Amazing. Remember, he can't get in the back of the pit, and Kobbe's gonna chase him away. The Baron goes down. Splyce get it. Teleport coming in. His Upset. Killer Instinct tries to take down the key carry from Nisqy, but he can't do it. Odo's gonna fall can. Schalke collapse on Splyce. They need to find something more out of this one. The cats go the wrong way, and Splyce escape to live another day.
4 members of Splyce walk away with the Baron. Good decision-making there from the side of Splyce as they find themselves a Baron off the back of that inhibitor. Schalke, they didn't have their top laner. He wasn't able to get involved with the fight, that late-game fight that they so desperately wanted. Wasn't able to come to fruition because they didn't have the members in Splyce and they're punishing Schalke.
And they had no flashes here, so no one wanted to try and go in early and risk dying in a 4v5, even though Splyce was tanking the Baron and they could have bought more time for Sjokz. This ulti from the Maokai has to go towards the turret of Splyce, not towards kaSing moving to the top lane.
And a couple of crucial things that happened were amazing. He was just hanging around the top side of the pit where he had no support from the rest of his team, which meant that Kobbe and kaSing immediately jumped on top of him, forcing him to flash very early, which meant that he had no way to get inside the Baron pit. He couldn't go for the steal, and that meant that Splyce could feel more confident trying to rush it down and secure that objective.
So they now have the Baron buff, just got out in time. They lost the bot inhib earlier, but their mid laner, without completing the death cap, is already on 550 AP. You're gonna add that bad boy on top of it, and we're talking insane numbers from Nisqy on the Syndra. Will even be tough for Vizicsacsi to stay alive long enough against it. Elder Drake is gonna be still a couple of minutes. Splyce, are they looking to actually push anything aggressively? So far in this game, they've taken it pretty slow.
They have. It's been all about Nisqy. Has all 4 of his team's kills. And it's been all about Odoamne, if you're a Schalke guy, all 4 of his team's deaths as well. We are getting towards death cap on Nukeduck as well. He's got the double needlessly large rod. 4th completed item on Upset. You saw how he tried to dive Nisqy in that last fight. If he could have had just a tiny bit more damage, he should have been able to find that pick in the end.
So what he did that was quite interesting was that he ulted in, he then used his Q into instant E, because he knew that if Nisqy had a target on him, he would have just ulted him. So the only damage he actually had was like an auto plus the Q damage, but he then stayed in stealth for the rest of that engage because he knew of the kill threat that Nisqy did have onto him.
Has still done the 2nd most damage this game as well. Upset, the franchise man for Schalke, stepping up. He has to in these late game fights. It's all about him and Sjokz. Sjokz the front line, Upset the one reigning held down from the other side. It's a 4v4 down in this bottom lane. Top, Nukeduck and Odoamne face up against each other as well. The tower goes down.
Yeah, Nukeduck is definitely winning that one. He's going straight for the turret, might even threaten to kill Odoamne. Meanwhile, Splyce trying to push fast enough to force Nukeduck away from this top lane. They want to get him into a team fight. He's not having it though, he's getting inhib.
Going for the inhibitor, has his teleport, whereas Odoamne does not have his own. Inhibs are going to be traded once again, but you can see Xerxe was trying to back away. They're trying to join his team up. Inhib goes down on the side of Splyce. Schalke get one in response.
Schalke just trying to buy time for Nukeduck to secure the inhibitor and then back away. He has a minion wave. I feel like trying to end would be a little ambitious, so he smartly backs off, and they'll end up trading inhibs. And for Schalke, this is the best case scenario. The fact that a Baroned up team you end up trading against, definitely a good trade.
Now, how quickly can teams set up for Elder Drake? If you're Splyce, you want to get it and finish the game instantly. If you're Schalke, you do not want to lose this one. It is simply impossible to defend against a triple Infernal Drake, Elder Drake.
Basically trying to fight against 4.5 Infernal Dragons on the side of Splyce, plus that true damage that you get, only amped up by the fact you have 3 dragons already in your back pocket.
Now, what setup do we have for Nisqy to land a stun? He has a little brush right there that is now warded by Splyce. Schalke all coming down the same ramp into the river. It's gonna be the big deciding team fight in the game. Upset is on the side here. He's actually TP'd.
Teleport away!
They're gonna go for the base!
Teleporting away, they're going for the base! Elder Dragon has been started here by Splyce. Do they realize, do they notice that Upset and Nukeduck are pushing in the wave? The Realm Warp used as well to bring the minions in. Elder Dragon down to 3,000 HP, but it's a 3v5. Splyce aren't gonna get back! Look at this, the Nexus
It's a recall, it's a recall!
It's Upset and Nukeduck, the teleports! Can they kill the tower quickly enough? They get it! One teleport's gonna come out! But Splyce win the late game and they take down! Oh my god, Schalke, what was that?
Schalke with an amazing backdoor call right at the very end of the game. We talked about this being a close series. Schalke draw first blood.
They knew Splyce would do everything to secure the Elder Drake. 5 members there, no one thinking about the side lanes for a moment. And with the combination of Ryze, ulti, and double TP, while they were setting up to fight, they make the call. Upset was like hiding around to the side, so he had an opening to either go into team fight or TP away. What a call in the end. And people were asking, how close is this series going to be? Like, that's game 1 right there.
That's game 1.
Insane back and forth. Splyce winning early, Schalke defending, and then the late game when it looks like Splyce can win a big team fight, they don't even get the team fight.
Oh, but it was just, the decision making was insane. The fact that both of them TP at the same time, and then the use of the Realm Warp to just bring the minions in was, everything was so beautiful. Fantastic decision making there from Schalke.
We talked about Splyce having a week to prep for this game. How the hell do you prep for that? There's no way you can expect that sort of shot calling coming out from Schalke in such a clutch situation.
And the best thing about it is, last split, and for a really long time, we've been talking about how Nukeduck is not a clutch player. He does not make those moves that will win you the game. That was clutch. That was so impressive from Schalke and Nukeduck. And as you were saying, Deficio, all you've ever said is Year of the Duck.
That's all I've ever said.
All you've ever said. Oh, what a great game 1.
Here's the thing, if you're Splyce, the way to move past this is you ignore the last 30 seconds of the game.
Yep.
And you talk about how they did in the early game, how Nisqy got ahead, how they had the advantage, triple Infernal, and you talk about that mid game where you slowed down. Yeah. Probably more than you had to with the current situation you were in, with Syndra being so far ahead, Kobbe being ahead in items as well. That's where you can still make a lot of changes, so you don't even get to this point in the game where Schalke can backdoor.
Schalke did not look strong in the early game. It was all about Splyce. It was all about Xerxe getting those ganks towards the mid lane. It's what we wanted to see from him. We talked about Spring Split playoff Xerxe. He showed it for us in this game once again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of the series plays out. Schalke will take the first win, and we have best of ones in our regular season. This will be our first best of series so far this split, and how teams will adapt will be crucial. It's something that we often talk about coming into big international events, and the experience on these 2 teams is something they've been in these best of 5 situations before. Both these rosters are stacked with playoff performing individuals, and now they just need to bring that experience into this series. And Splyce, they look good. They just need to shore up a couple of small things, maybe make a couple of changes in the draft in order to edge out a win against Schalke.
Remember what's on the line tonight. It's a spot in Madrid on the 8th and 9th of September. If you want to watch all the action live, you can get your tickets at eu.lolesports.com/Madrid 2018. In addition to this, you can also catch the finals in one of our 254 cinema viewing parties in 30 countries all across Europe. Visit? That's not a word.
Vizicsacsi?
After that game, yeah, sure. Visit eu.lolesports.com/cinemas for more information.
All in lowercase as well. It is case sensitive, so make sure you don't have that caps lock button on when you type it in.
Thank you for that. It was very informative.
You're
I didn't
welcome.
realize it was case sensitive.
Yeah, I was told by my producer, so you're welcome.
That's very helpful of them. Well, for more on Schalke's win, let's check in with the analyst desk.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy we're talking about caps lock and lowercase when we should be talking about how Schalke won that game. Wow, you know, when you talk about the craziness that happens in best of fives, this is exactly what you talk about. And I actually want to start by just cutting you guys off and looking at that moment once again. Brought to you by Acer Predator, the insane backdoor for Schalke. Ender, what is so good about how Schalke executes this backdoor?
Well, right at the start, it looks like they're trolling because the minion wave is so far away from the Nexus towers, but they use the Realm Warp that takes minions with them into the base, and the rest of Splyce are already committed to this Elder Dragon. No one can really respond. By the time they TP, it's too late. The tower goes down, and they just instantly lose.
So you have to say it was the right call by Schalke.
It was the right call by Schalke.
Entirely.
And it's crazy, too, because I thought going into that fight that Schalke could actually win the 5v5, but they said, we don't need it. We've got the macro. We TP top and end.
And what is the weirdest thing about it is how is the team that had Baron, that had 3 Infernal Dragons, that had everything in their hands, Djoko, how did they end up in this position?
I think they didn't care about Nukeduck split pushing like this, and they thought, like you said, it was really far from the base, and he Ryze ulted, and actually I think it's 200 IQ plays, because not a lot of players pulled that off, and yeah, I think this game is it's key. It's key for a BO5.
It's key for the best of 5. That's a great point.
Yeah, and the craziest part about it was that every single time Splyce got an inhibitor, Nukeduck was actually in a side lane split pushing, trading inhibitors, even though he got set so far behind.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get all the way back to the start. Let's get to picks and mends. We talked a lot about the fact that the patch came in and some of the comfort picks for Splyce would not be available. On the other hand, it looks like Splyce completely took the route of we're going to ban away or take away everything that Schalke 04 has been successful on. We are going to take away that Ezreal and play it ourselves. We are going to pick away that Braum. So that was quite an interesting plan from them, Djoko.
Yeah, I agree. I think they made a really good draft, and I was really surprised that they were like getting these early kills, these early ganks, and I was like, okay, it's perfect. We talk about it. There's a need to be proactive in early games, and he did it. And I was like, all right, it's starting super well. They got the 3 Infernal. I was super happy with that.
Yeah, Splyce, you know, as Peter Dunn said, we focused on the early game, and it came out.
Exactly, and I think the draft was built really well from them, even though they lost in the end, because you have Odoamne in a winning matchup in a side lane. He should be able to split push and get advantages for his team, and the rest of the team is built to have an early game impact, very strong mid game, and then if you make it to the late game, you have a lot of tools to disengage fights, so it should have worked out well for them, whereas Schalke drafted all for that 5 versus 5, but then roles reversed at the end and it got messy.
Yeah, it did. But in the beginning, Splyce did what we wanted to see them do. We wanted them to be strong in the early game, and Djoko, we wanted Xerxe to be proactive in the early game. And that is exactly what we saw. He gets boots and he goes mid.
Yeah, he just buys and legit using Predator, and with Gragas is basically a free kill if you execute it well, and he did. So
well, together with the stun from Nisqy, it does seem almost too easy, and that makes me think that Nukeduck does have to see it coming.
Yeah, he does definitely. It of course activates the playoff buff for Nisqy as well, who's then able to get the solo kill on Nukeduck in the mid lane and set up what should have been a very successful match for Splyce. They should have been able to use those advantages to close out, but it couldn't happen.
Yeah, so Djoko, when you look at what happened in the rest of the game, what happened then to Splyce? They had only 1,000 gold lead at 20 minutes, which is not a lot, but which is a lot for Splyce because all their carries were already on 2 items, where usually that's not the case for them. So where do you think they dropped the ball in the mid game?
I felt they had the lead, right, and they controlled the map. They went to take their drakes. Everything was working well, but the thing where they lacked a bit, it was going for their T2. I don't think they played the map on 3 lane and going for those extra stores and extend the vision. They just felt stuck with T2s, went to force a play with Nashor and Nether Drake, and I felt like it was controlled, but could be a bit cleaner.
Yeah, especially with picks like Gragas and Syndra. I think if you take control of one side of the jungle and then look to abuse that vision advantage to find picks, that's how you get victories. And then, of course, Odoamne was never able to really pressure onto any tier 2 tower. That's how you break the inner line, is with a strong split pusher, but it was totally nullified by Schalke.
Yeah, it was nullified by Schalke. And is this then where we have to praise Schalke for the fact that they then activated their Ryze and the fact that he can move around the map, because they went and killed Odoamne twice in a row? Were they just waiting for that moment to be able to do that? Is that praise to Schalke that we're just not mentioning enough?
Yeah, I think Schalke countered it pretty well because they had the Shen and they use it correctly, and it prevents the split pushing from Odoamne that he should be stronger against Maokai. And yeah, somehow they didn't let him to split push, and they could also at the same time, we saw that Schalke went for the Nash, and they were able, Splyce went for the Nash, and they were able to hold it, and I think everything was planned and calculated.
Yeah, it was really smart too, because they double ganked Odoamne in the side lane to try and shut him down and enable Nukeduck to later win those 1v1s against him in the side lane. But even from draft, Schalke were always trying to take it to the late game. They came into the series, knew that Splyce struggled to get early advantages and close out matches, so they said, hey, if you're not going to beat us hard enough early on, we can stall out.
But this is not in the plan, is it?
No, this was not in the plan, losing the Baron, losing 3 Infernal Drakes. Of course, they wanted to keep it close, and they did as far as gold was concerned, and Splyce weren't able to get over the finish line.
So yeah, this then ends us or puts us in this moment in the game where you have the team that has Baron. They pushed all the way to the inhibitor immediately, Splyce, but Nukeduck was just able to put so much pressure on that top inhibitor for some, not for some reason. He was just really strong because they killed Odoamne a couple of times. But still, if you're Splyce, and this is what you talked about at the beginning, Djoko, this is a best of 5, and in the first game, you have 3 Infernal Drakes, you have a gold lead, you take Baron, you seem to be in control. Oof, that is crushing.
Yeah, you can't lose this game. Like in the BO5 especially, it's really huge because you have to reset your mindset for the new games, and you know this one won't go off that easy. So yeah, that one is really painful, and it's really sad because I felt like it's a bit underserved a bit. But even though like Nukeduck made a huge play, and it's okay, you know. But yeah, I don't know what to say yet about this game because I feel like it was too messy a bit.
Well, let's look again at the finish then. Maybe that helps us recontextualize what happened. The crazy finish from Schalke. We showed it at the beginning, but it's worth showing again. This is where the 3 Infernal Drake team just wants to get Dragon.
Yeah, it's so close, because Splyce, again, they have to go for the Drake, the Realm Warp play, and the canceling of recalls by the rest of Schalke really just sets up for this play to happen. And you have to remember that it was upset, and it's an AD carry with teleport again going into the base to speed up this Nexus falling.
In this exact moment, could Splyce have done anything different? Could they have not started the Elder Drake and immediately engaged on the rest and killed them all and went back? Was there anything, or were they absolutely stuck, Djoko?
Yeah, I think you need to push this Ryze away to not let him do that, because we saw one time he was 1v1 against Gnar and he chanked it to mid HP, so at this point they were like, okay, we can play side, so let's play side. And until this moment, I think they should have invested more people into it to not let that happen, and don't go for a 50-50 Drake when they are threatening your base. I think this was the worst scores ever they could possibly do. So yeah, I think they could have just pushed him out and...
Yeah, they were in a really tough situation though, because of course they didn't have that top inhibitor, so they either had to fight for this Drake or go back, take those minions down and then lose the Dragon. I think the only thing, super small, Gragas ult onto those TPing members, but they didn't have a ward in the bush, so it was so hard to actually know where that was coming from.
And it was the presence of mind of Schalke and of Nukeduck to make that move and then clean out and clear the base in the end and win the game. And this is so interesting to me because we get into the series with the high expectations, and Schalke picks a draft and tells Splyce, we know that we're better than you in the late game and we don't care if you get ahead early. But in the end, they have to rely on a backdoor to finish it, but they still win. So they are on cloud 9, right, Schalke, right? They are now completely confident in their drafts and in their playstyle. I can't imagine anything different.
And for them, they get to keep drafting similar compositions until Splyce prove we can win the early game. We can then close out on you. So it really takes a ton of pressure off them and makes it even more difficult for Splyce to fight for a game.
So for Splyce, what is it now? Is it now do what you did in game 1, but do it more confident and keep pushing? Because if they do the same thing and just sit back again, it's the same story for 3 games in a row, Djoko. Where is that extra edge? Who are you looking at? Is there anyone that can push that advantage further for Splyce?
I do believe Nisqy was like really fed this game, and he could have pressure side or pressure even mid and get tower when we won, or if Xerxe is playing around him, they could take every tier 2, and that's what I think the big mistake was there. Because they had the snowball, I mean they had the lead, they had the snowball a bit with those Drakes, but they didn't know how to close out the game, and I felt like that was the biggest problem, and I feel them because I felt like it was our problem during the old split, so yeah, it's okay guys, like next game will be better.
Yeah, it's all about the mid game for them. They said they were working on it in practice, in scrims during the week. Now it actually happened because they didn't prove that they'd actually solved those issues.
No, we have to see it right now. But for Schalke, in their first playoff series ever, they got off to a great start, and they are now just 2 wins away from Madrid. We'll see if Splyce can bounce back when we return.
What is that flash in the mid lane? Oh, you can also do it now.
Xerxe gets the gank in. Body slam used. Nukeduck tries to flash away. The barrel's going to slow him up. There's first blood to Splyce.
You're probably killing him again with Xerxe around.
So Predator
maybe even without.
Even without, Nukeduck's so low. Nisqy flashes in. What was that? Splyce pushing in the wave. The Realm Warp used as well to bring the minions in. Elder Dragon down to 3,000 HP, but it's a 3v5. Splyce aren't going to get back. Look at this. The next is down. It's upset. Nukeduck the teleports. Can they kill the tower quickly enough? They get it. One teleport's going to come out, but Splyce win the late game and they take down. Oh my God, Schalke, what was that?